What's going on, my friends? For today's watch review, we're taking a look at the Seiko SNKE01. Real quick, let's go over the wristwatch check, which today I am rocking the Helm Miyako. This is an absolutely beautiful watch, one that is not as well known, but I'm definitely very excited to do the review. And secondly, the giveaway for the G-Shock AWM500 is still ongoing, so if you haven't entered the drawing, make sure to do so. The instructions are in the description below. And with that out of the way, let's get straight into the review. Starting off with price, the SNKE retails at $240. However, realistically, on the street, you're gonna spend around $120. For dimensions and weight, starting off with diameter, we've got a 36.5 millimeter diameter, a case height or thickness of 12 millimeters, a lug to lug of 41 millimeters, a lug width of 10 millimeters, but I don't really count that because it's an integrated bracelet, so the end links are actually 20 millimeters, and a weight of 116 grams or 4.09 ounces.
If you guys watch the channel, you know that I love to wear my watches at the gym. I feel like that's a great way to identify any problems with ergonomics or comfort. And in this case, the SNKE did fantastic. Even though it's more of a dressy, delicate watch, maybe not delicate, but it's definitely not like considered a heavy activity watch, but I feel like it did fine. And I always like to wear them on cardio excursions too, because I feel like that's another great way to figure out if it's comfortable or not. And on a hot summer day or on a hot spring day, your wrist swells up, and that's how you can tell how comfortable the bracelet is and the bottom side of the watch. And again, it was great. The dimensions are not in your face, they're not crazy, they're not too big. With the 36 millimeter, it really sits comfortably on the top of your wrist. And with that very reasonable weight, you're not gonna feel it at all. It's one of those watches where it can sit comfortably in the background, and if you need it, it's there. And if you don't need it, you can just forget about it and it's not gonna bother you. I know that I'm taking out the SNKE on a hike and I've been doing all, physical activities with it, but I think it's important to understand what this watch is and what it is not. And the SNKE is definitely not like your, everyday, rugged, tactical, war-fighting watch. I think that it is more of a dress watch. It's definitely got more of an elegant style to it. And to that end, I think it does it very well. But even though its primary purpose wasn't to be that kind of watch, I think that it does a respectable job in doing so. It's comfortable to wear. I think the dimensions are great for people with thin wrists and people with larger wrists. I think it's gonna fit most people's area of comfort as far as the wrist wearing experience. And just speaking aesthetically, there's no denying that steel shine that you get from that brushed finishing is so attractive. When you're out in natural sunlight, it's a beautiful thing, and it's even better knowing how much you spent getting that look. I think so far my only gripe with the SNKE right now was the bracelet. I'm not a fan of integrated bracelets, and I'm gonna be real with you, the quality of the OEM bracelet is just very cheap. But I'm not gonna dock any points because at this price range, that is what you should expect to get. And really, at the end of the day, you can find 1,000,001 reasons why you shouldn't like a watch. Those are for the people who are super nitpicky. But for average people like you and I, you really can't do, you can do much worse than the SNKE. And I think it's just a great choice for really anybody.
Going over some general information, the SNKE comes with the Seiko 7S26 movement. So what you're gonna get with that movement is your standard 3-hand dial with a day-date complication. It's gonna beat at 21,600 beats per hour, which is gonna give you a 41-hour power reserve. Accuracy is not so good. It's rated for -20 plus 50 seconds per day. And you're also getting the DiaShock shock absorbing system. So really, even though accuracy is not rated, the best, it is a robust movement that you're really not gonna have too many issues with. if any at all. The 7S26 movement is an older movement and I believe discontinued, so you're not really going to have any of the modern comforts of your standard automatic movement. So it's non-hand winding and it's also non-hacking. To me, that's not a big deal, but it's something you should know if you do decide to get one of these. The SNKE comes in a stainless steel case as well as a bracelet. At the top, you've got a fixed bezel, and inside that bezel, there is a hardlex crystal. Underneath that crystal, we've got applied indices, and we also have applied lume on the outer edge of all of those indices and the hands as well. For the crown, it's just a regular push-pull crown, and on the back side, there is a screw-down caseback, and all of this gives you 50 meters of water resistance. Here's a quick look at the Lumeshot. I'm not complaining about the lume, it's not a torch, but it gets the job done. Going over the dial, for practical use, I think it's easy enough to read. Aesthetically, I think it's subtle, sharp, and classy. I think it's classy because the indices and the hands are very slender, and they also have just a hint of chrome polish, so they glisten in the sunlight. Not so much, not like in your face, but ever so slightly, and so you've got that very appealing visual play in the light without looking tacky or too much. I also like the classic Seiko 5 logo. It gives the dial a kind of retro or vintage feel to it. And the 3 lines of text at the bottom tactfully fill out the empty space without feeling like you're getting overwhelming amounts of data. Now moving on to the bezel, this is where I think this is like the main selling point of this watch. I think the silver tone brushed finish of that bezel gives the SNKE the appearance of looking like it's a lot higher in value. And that's not me saying that I think it's a cheap looking watch, but I think it is on par visually with watches much more expensive. For example, when I saw this watch for the first time, it immediately reminded me of the Tudor black base steel. And I'm not saying that they look the same at all, but the emotions invoked from the black base steel are the same ones that I feel with the SNKE. Another thing that makes the bezel so great is the markings around the bezel. So all of the minute markings are engraved. So it just adds to that level of quality. For the crown, I prefer a screw down crown. So for me personally, this push-pull crown is not ideal, but as it stands, it still functions just right and you're not gonna have any issues with it. It's on the smaller side, but the coined edge is very grippy, so it's easy to use and it's easy to pull out. So basically, my only issues with the crown are purely subjective. Looking at it from an unbiased point of view, it's fine and you're not gonna have any issues with it. For the bracelet, I think visually it looks good, but physically, I hate everything about it and everything that it stands for. From the integrated end links to the adjustment system, this style of stamped and folded steel bracelet should become illegal. However, with all of that being said, it works just fine. I think I've just been in the watch collecting game too long, so I'm sort of set in my ways with the style of bracelet that I want. Objectively speaking, everything works as it should, and functionally, you're not gonna have any issues with it. And even though I absolutely despise integrated end links, in this case, I'm willing to overlook it because taking into consideration the case dimensions and the lug dimensions, it is appropriate. For the caseback, you've got your standard Seiko display caseback. I am not a fan of it because the 7S26, or at least in this case, is not like a refined movement. It's not meant to be like shown off or displayed. So, you know, for me personally, I think that this is sort of a cheap gimmick. I feel like a closed caseback would have looked better and more professional. And on top of that, I feel like this caseback sort of unnecessarily adds thickness. So even though 12 millimeters isn't thick at all, because the diameter is only 36 millimeters, it creates this optical illusion of just like a very stout watch. But that's me being very nitpicky. You're really not gonna notice the extra thickness. It's just something for me, I wanted to change. And so what I ended up doing was getting an aftermarket case back from the Moki Mods. It's the same case back that I got from my Dress KX. It's 50% smaller, and it's also a closed case back. So we'll go ahead and take a look at that right now. And so with that new case back, I feel like we've got a lot sharper looking watch, or a sharper looking package overall. And it also reduces the case thickness to 10.5 millimeters, which 10.5 millimeters and a 36 millimeter diameter, I think is just right. Going over the finishing, I think it's beautifully done here. The hint of mirror polishing along the edge and the side, and even on the hands and indices, really accentuates the brushed tool-like finish. And the end result is a very professional, smart looking watch. For my overall thoughts, you know guys, I think this is just a fantastic watch. I know that in my review, I shared a few complaints or gripes, but I want the key takeaway here to be that my complaints were all purely subjective. And so when it comes to watches, when you find that the only issues are subjective, that's really not an issue at all. I think the SNKE is a watch that can be enjoyed by seasoned enthusiasts and immediately by newcomers into the watch collecting hobby. The price that you can find the SNKE is really such a beautiful thing because it's accessible to most people. I think you could be a top level CEO at a board meeting or a broke college student, and in either case, the SNKE would look appropriate. And I know that the case dimensions might not seem like it's your cup of tea, especially for those of you that prefer larger sizes, but I'm gonna tell you what, you know, I think it looks just fine, especially with the lug to lug. It's all just like an optical illusion that looks right. And I know that for a lot of people, a 36 millimeter diameter might seem too small. And I'm gonna be the first one to tell you that, you know, I would never wear a 36 millimeter watch, but the dimensions overall really work well together. For myself, I mean, I'll be the first one to tell you, I do not have a small wrist at all. I normally have a 7.5 inch wrist, and that's on a good day. And even with such a thick wrist, I never felt at any point that the SNKE was too small. The overall case dimensions just work really well together with the lug to lug and the thickness and the integrated bracelet. Everything fits. So basically what I'm trying to say is, if you looked at the dimensions and you were like, oh, 36 millimeters is too small, I will encourage you or highly recommend to reconsider it, because I'm telling you, from somebody with bigger wrists, this watch works. But other than that, that's pretty much all I gotta say. The review was a very positive one, and I do highly recommend this watch. One thing I want to be clear about is to not make this watch something that it's not. You know, it's not a luxury watch. It's not a spec monster. But what it is a very budget-friendly, beautiful looking watch that requires minimal amounts of commitment, but maximum amounts of enjoyment. That's all for now. I hope you enjoyed this review. I always have a blast making them. If you like these reviews, make sure to subscribe, join the community. I've got several different platforms on social media. They're all in the description below. There is no requirements to join. All you gotta do is hit the join button or subscribe button or follow button and you're in. So I hope to see you there. And thanks so much for watching. I'll catch you guys later. Bye.